Have you ever noticed something strange about people who quietly build wealth? They rarely spend their time chasing the next can't-miss investment. They're usually not checking stock prices every hour. They're not constantly jumping between cryptocurrencies or trying to predict what the market will do next. In fact, their approach to money often looks surprisingly boring. Let's imagine someone named Oliver. For years, he assumed wealthy people must have access to information everyone else didn't. Maybe they knew the right stocks. Maybe they had better financial advisors. Maybe there was some secret strategy that ordinary people simply weren't aware of. But the more Oliver learned, the more he realized the opposite was true. Most people overcomplicate money. The wealthiest people often simplify it. Instead of making hundreds of financial decisions every month, they follow a system. A system that tells every dollar exactly where it should go before they even have the chance to spend it. If you've ever felt like money disappears faster than you earn it, or you want a simpler way to manage your finances, consider subscribing. Now here's what surprised Oliver. The system wasn't based on earning a huge salary. It wasn't designed only for millionaires, and it didn't require picking winning investments. It was built around three simple numbers: 15, 65, and 20. At first they looked almost meaningless, but together they created a framework that had been helping people build wealth for decades. The idea was simple. Every paycheck had a job before it even reached your bank account. One portion was meant to build your future. One portion was meant to run your life. And one portion was meant to let you actually enjoy the money you work so hard to earn. It sounds almost too simple, but that's exactly why so many people ignore it. We're conditioned to believe that building wealth must be complicated, that there has to be some secret investment strategy or some perfect time to start. In reality, the hardest part isn't finding a better system, it's following a simple one consistently. And the first number in this framework might be the most important financial habit you'll ever build. Let's start with the first number, 15%. According to this framework, that's the portion of every paycheck that never truly belongs to your present self. It belongs to your future. At first, Oliver didn't like that idea. 15% sounded like a lot. He looked at his monthly bills, his rent, his groceries, and wondered how anyone was supposed to put that much money aside. Then he realized something that completely changed the way he thought about saving. Most people save whatever happens to be left at the end of the month. The problem is, there's usually very little left. Some months, there's nothing left at all. Oliver flipped the process around. Instead of spending first and saving later, he started saving first and spending what remained. It sounds like a tiny change, but it completely changed his financial life. That first 15% had two very important jobs. The first was creating a safety net, because life has a habit of arriving unannounced. The car suddenly needs repairs. A medical bill appears. The washing machine stops working. Without savings, those moments often become financial emergencies. People reach for a credit card, take out a loan, or spend months trying to recover from one unexpected expense. But when Oliver slowly built an emergency fund, those same problems felt completely different. They were still frustrating. They just weren't financially devastating anymore. That alone made money feel less stressful. But the second job of that 15% was even more important. Once Oliver had enough money set aside for emergencies, every new contribution stopped sitting in cash. It started getting invested. And that's where time quietly became his greatest advantage. Imagine planting a small tree. For the first few years, it barely seems to grow. Then, almost without noticing, it becomes large enough to provide shade all on its own. Investing works in much the same way. The first dollars don't seem to accomplish very much, but year after year, they begin generating growth of their own. and then that growth starts generating even more growth. That's the quiet power of compounding. It's why two people can invest similar amounts of money, yet end up with dramatically different results, simply because one started earlier. Oliver stopped thinking of investing as trying to get rich quickly. Instead, he started thinking of it as giving every dollar as much time as possible to do its job. Of course, where that money goes matters too. One of the first places Oliver looked was his employer's retirement plan. His company matched part of every contribution he made. At first, he hadn't paid much attention to it. Then he realized something. Turning down an employer match is a little like refusing part of your paycheck. It's money that's available, but only if you choose to take it. After that, he focused on using tax-advantaged retirement accounts whenever possible. Not because they were complicated, but because they allowed more of his investments to keep growing over time instead of losing part of that growth to taxes each year. The wealthy often understand something simple. Before they look for better investments, they make sure they're using the best accounts available. Because building wealth isn't only about earning more, it's also about keeping more of what you earn. And once Oliver had the first 15% working for his future, he turned his attention to the biggest part of every paycheck. The 65%, the part that quietly determines whether wealth grows or slowly slips away. Once Oliver understood the importance of investing first, he turned to the biggest category of all, the 65%. This was the money that kept his life running. Housing, transportation, groceries, utilities, insurance. Everything he genuinely needed from month to month. At first, 65% felt like an arbitrary number. Why not 70% or 80%? Then Oliver realized the percentage wasn't magic. It was a boundary. Without a boundary, expenses have an incredible ability to grow alongside your income. Think about what usually happens after someone gets a raise. The apartment suddenly feels too small. The old car doesn't seem as nice anymore. Weekend dinners become more frequent. None of these decisions feel unreasonable. In fact, they often feel deserved. That's why lifestyle inflation is so difficult to notice. It doesn't happen all at once. It arrives one upgrade at a time. Oliver caught himself doing exactly this. After a promotion, he started looking at nicer apartments. Then he considered upgrading his car. Not because he needed to, but because he finally could. That's when he stopped and asked himself a simple question. Will this make my life better for a few months? Or my future better for decades? That question changed the way he spent money. He still improved his lifestyle over time. He just refused to let every raise disappear into bigger monthly payments, because once your fixed expenses increase, they're surprisingly difficult to bring back down. Then came the final number, 20%. At first, Oliver assumed this was the least important part of the system. It was just spending money. But it turned out to be one of the reasons the entire framework actually works. This wasn't money for bills. It wasn't money for investing. It was money for life. Dinner with friends, a weekend trip, a new hobby, concert tickets. The occasional purchase that simply made life more enjoyable. That might sound strange in a wealth-building plan. Shouldn't every extra dollar be invested? Not necessarily, because building wealth isn't just about mathematics. It's about behavior. Oliver had tried extreme budgeting before. He cut out every unnecessary purchase, said no to everything, saved aggressively for a few months, and then eventually became so frustrated that he spent far more than he ever intended. The cycle repeated itself over and over. This framework broke that cycle. The 20% wasn't a weakness. It was permission. Permission to enjoy the money he'd worked hard to earn without feeling guilty, because the important decisions had already been made. His future was being funded. His essentials were covered. Whatever remained could be enjoyed confidently. And surprisingly, that made it much easier to stay consistent year after year. Oliver realized something most people never do. Financial success isn't built by following the perfect plan for 3 months. It's built by following a good plan for 30 years. And the people who quietly become wealthy usually aren't the ones with the most complicated budgets. They're the ones with a system simple enough to keep following, even when life gets busy. By now, Oliver understood something that had completely changed the way he thought about money. The 15-65-20 rule wasn't really about percentages, it was about removing uncertainty. Before he had a system, every payday felt like a series of decisions. How much should I save? Can I afford to spend this? Should I invest more this month? Maybe I'll start next month instead. Those small decisions don't seem like a problem until you realize you're making them over and over again. And every time you hesitate, emotion has a chance to take over. Oliver eventually realized that wealthy people don't necessarily have stronger willpower. They simply make fewer financial decisions. The important ones have already been made. The money for investing leaves first. The essentials stay within a limit. The money for enjoying life already has a purpose. Everything has a place before temptation ever shows up. That doesn't mean life always goes according to plan. Some months unexpected expenses appear. Some months income changes. There were even periods where Oliver couldn't quite reach the full 15%. Instead of giving up, he simply adjusted. If he could only invest 8% for a while, he invested 8%. If his essential expenses climbed above 65% because rent increased, he slowly worked them back down over time. He stopped chasing perfection and focused on consistency instead. Because consistency is what separates people who build wealth from people who only talk about building it. The truth is, very few people become financially successful because they discovered some hidden investment. Most become successful because they repeated a handful of good decisions for a very long time. Looking back, Oliver smiled at how complicated money used to seem. He thought he needed to predict markets, find the perfect investment, or constantly search for better strategies. In reality, what changed his financial life wasn't a secret. It was having a framework simple enough to follow month after month, year after year. Because the goal was never to make every financial decision perfectly. The goal was to build a system that kept making good decisions even when motivation disappeared. And maybe that's why the people who quietly become wealthy rarely look like financial geniuses. They just understand something most people overlook. Wealth isn't usually built through brilliant moments. It's built through ordinary habits, repeated long enough that one day they produce extraordinary results.